All right. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. This one's kind of a whatever video. I had a question recently by somebody, and they said, we were talking, they said, is your name really Armand? And I said, yes, technically. So let me explain, and then I'm going to explain how it works with my writing journey. How's that? So technically, my name is Armando Rosamilia, very Italian. Um, and I'm named after pretty much every first male Rosamilia, going back a long time. So my grandfather was Armando. There was Armandos before him. My uncle um, was Armando. His son Armando. My dad was Gerald, second born. So second born in our Italian family was Gerald, and third was Salvatore. Although all the Salvatores I ever met in my family were Sally Boy. That's what they called them. I don't care if you were 5 years old or 50 years old. You were Sally Boy. I am Armando. However, as a kid, like immediately they call me Armin, not Armand, Armin, and that's same with my cousin. Same with my uncle Armin. We dropped the O. So really, the only people that called me Armando growing up were like if I got pulled over by the cops or something. FBI raided my house. DEA. No, none of that ever happened. So that was, whatever. Growing up in school every year, you'd get a new teachers, and they would go around Armando, and I'd say Armin. Okay, and then they would jot that down. And then after a while, everybody just called me Armin, and I forgot my name was Armando. There was a period in my teen years. So all my friends call me Arm or Armin. Growing up in New Jersey, there was a period there where, when I was a teenager, me and my brother loved pro wrestling. Loved it. We would watch NWA. We would watch AWA, World Class Championship Wrestling from Florida. We watch all of them, not really the WWF all that much. And there was a wrestler, the Guerrero family. Okay. And one of them was Mondo Guerrero. And then I found out from reading the wrestling magazines that his real name was Armando Rosamilia. No, not Armando Guerrero. I'm Armando Rosamilia. I don't know what the hell I'm thinking. So, I'm not going to edit that either. So they called him Mondo. So then people started calling me Mondo, which is cool. My mother never liked that. Never called me Mondo. My dad never. My dad would call me Arnold. Not sure why. He would call my brother Scutch, who my brother also is a Gerald. My dad, Gerald, second male. Scutch, which made a lot more sense than him calling me Arnold. My dad would also, at dinner, my mother would say grace. And then at the end of grace, she would say amen. And then my dad would always say, and Gerald. Still remember these things. I say all of that to say I went by Armin. Then when I moved to Florida in 2001 and I started working for a department store as a footwear manager. And in the interview, I don't know why I said Armand instead of Armin. And then everybody just started calling me when I'm in Florida. Everybody calls me Armand. My wife calls me Armand. We've been together 13 years now. Armand. Everybody calls me Armand. So it's always funny when, like, my buddy George comes from Florida, down to Florida from New Jersey, and he calls me Arm or Armin. My mother calls me Armin. First time Shelly said something, my wife Shelly said something about Armand. My mother was like, that's not his name. His name is Armin. I'm like, well, my name's Armando. So Armand O. Yeah. In the 90s, the 1990s, for those paying attention, I was writing a lot of short stories, horror short stories. And I was submitting them to a lot of, back then they were known as zines. Okay. So they were like magazines created in your bedroom kind of thing. They were everywhere. Everybody had their own zine, and it was basically it's like a Xerox side stapled, very cheap, very easy to produce. You'd make dozens of copies and you'd sell them for $1 or you'd hand them to your friends, whatever. And there was a ton of horror zines out there back in the day. And I'll probably end up doing a video at some point because I still have the zine that I created in the 90s. I'll pull that out. Anyway, and I would submit stories to a ton of different zines. And I'm glad some of them got accepted. I sold quite a few. I'm glad none of those exist. And I'm glad the stories themselves don't even exist because those were written on like word processors and you just print them out from the word processor. And I would make copies, and this can be crazy for some of you that aren't in your 50s. There was no email. There was nothing in 1995. So you would have to mail them in the actual mail, United States Post Office. You'd put a copy of it, your story in an envelope with a cover letter. Here's my story, blah, blah, blah. And then you put another envelope, a self-addressed stamped envelope in it. You would fold it and you would put it inside. So then you can hopefully get your story back. A lot of times they just kept your envelope with your stamps. But that was the way you would get your rejection back, or sometimes your submission that way. And so that was a lot of fun. I'm glad none of those stories exist because they were all really, really awful. But I would get a lot of people, either was a rejection or an acceptance, and they would write back and they would say, I loved your story. We're going to put it in our next issue, whatever. And here's $5 for your story, whatever. Here's $25 for your story, whatever. And they would just basically put cash in the envelope and wrap it up in a piece of paper so nobody could steal your money, I guess. Or you get a rejection and say, but they would always ask, what's your real name? Because I was Armand Rosamilia. And I realized quickly after seeing some of the zines that I was in, in the 90s, there was that big resurgence of Anne Rice and her interview with the vampire and all that. And one of the books is Vampire Armand. And so people assumed that my real name was like, Bob Rosen. And I was like Armand Rosamilia because it has, more cachet or whatever. I don't know. And they thought it was a fake name. And I saw a lot of times like Jimmy Lestat was, had stories in this issue, or, Valerie Ledeath, like all these really cheesy pen names that people had. You'd see that all the time. And it was always had something to do with, vampire, like, Johnny Crimson or something, Susie Sanguine, those kinds of stupid names. And I always thought that funny. And everybody be like, what's your real? Oh, we want to send you a check. Here, your story is $50. We're going to send you a check, $50. What's your name? And I would say Armando Rosamilia. And they would be like, oh, that is actually like your name, kind of. And it was always funny because, that was my name. It's been my name. I go by Armand or Armand Rosamilia, depending on who I'm talking to. But my name is actually Armando. And I always think that's funny when people are like, oh, Armand. Oh, like like Vampire Armand. And I'm like, yeah. That's why my parents named me in 1969. because they knew Anne Rice was going to write a book called Vampire Armand. You know, and there have been several Armands that I get a kick out of, like the um, Louise Penny books. That main character is Armand. I just watched the first 3 seasons, 2 seasons, whatever, of Tulsa King, and the dude who was on Doogie Howser in that is Armand, which I thought was interesting. They didn't call him Armando; they called him Armand, even though he's an Italian character, which is interesting. So you go, is his real name Armand, or is it real name Armando, or Armin? I think they call him Armin in that too, which I think is pretty neat. So anyway, so that's the long way of me saying, is my name Armand or Armin? No, not technically. It is Armando, but I go by Armand, I go by Armin, I go by Mondo. I go by all of those things. You can call me Ray, you can call me Jim, but do not call me late for dinner. Something like that. If you have any questions about my writing career, about me, about anything, just let me know. Send me a message. I want to continue to talk about myself. I'm a big fan of talking about myself. I'm going to be honest with you. Big fan. So do that. I would really appreciate that. And make sure you hit the subscribe. I'm building up this YouTube channel. I need more subscribers and I need a lot more hours watched. So if you are also a writer, or if I don't know, if you like me, whatever, just watch a couple videos. You know what I'm saying? Watch a couple. These are less than 15 minutes. A lot of these are just me just talking and talking until I'm like, yeah, I'm done talking. Like right now, I'm done talking.